Morning, this is Tom. We're going to give it another minute for people to join in to the meeting. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We've had plenty of people join the meeting. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to hear about the next 5-year update to the Lower East Coast Water Supply Plan. My name's Tom Colios. I'm the Water Supply Planning Section Lead at the district, and I'll be the moderator for today's stakeholder workshop. This Zoom meeting is being recorded, and within a few days, the recording will be made available to the public. The presentations you see here today have been posted to the district's Lower East Coast webpage if you want to view them again. I also wanted to mention that May 14th through the 20th is Reuse Week. Again, thank you for joining us, and we'll go ahead and get started on the agenda. We're going to have 6 presentations today. I'll talk about the plan update process and give a brief summary of the 2018 Lower East Coast plan from 5 years ago. Then Mark Elsner, our Bureau Chief, will describe the plan update schedule. Nancy, the Lower East Coast Plan Manager, will talk about progress since 2018 and the 2023 goals and objectives. Then Kevin Carter from Broward County Water and Wastewater Services will give an overview of the county's utility. Then Colleen Jordan, our demographer, will describe the demand estimates and projections, which are really the heart of the plan. Then Nancy will finish up with the next steps in the planning process. So under the Zoom format, all attendees are muted. However, we still want to hear from you. We will have question and comment periods at key points during the workshop, so please hold your questions until those points. Your comments and thoughts are critical to ensure the 2023 plan update addresses your issues and concerns, so I encourage you to share those with us. I'll now give a brief description of the plan update process, followed by a summary of the 2018 plan. Under the plan update will follow the Florida statute requirements, which states that water management districts need to identify sufficient water supply sources and future projects to meet existing and future reasonable beneficial uses during a 1 in 10 year drought for a minimum of 20 years while sustaining water resources and natural systems. Legislation was passed in the late 1990s requiring water supply plans to contain the elements listed here: demand estimates and projections for a 20-year period, source options, resource analyses, and identification of issues. The plan must also contain water resource and water supply development projects. In addition, MFL prevention and recovery strategies need to be reviewed and, if necessary, be updated. The district has been divided into 5 planning areas as indicated on the map, basically around drainage basins. The development of these plans for every region is staggered since the same planning team works on each one. The dates on the map represent when the next update for that region is due. And you can see last year we finished up the Lower West Coast plan, and hopefully this year, Lower East Coast and then we'll move up to the lower Kissimmee Basin. And then finally, upper Kissimmee Basin, which is part of CFWI in 2025. The Lower East Coast Planning Area includes all of Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade counties, most of Monroe County, and portions of Collier and Hendry counties. In addition, reservations for the Seminole and Miccosukee tribes are in the planning area. Bieber estimates a population of almost 7.3 million people by 2045, which is a little over 1 million increase from 2021. Colleen will talk in more detail about those population projections and agricultural projections in her presentation. The planning area also contains significant environmental features such as the Greater Everglades system, Biscayne Bay, Florida Bay, among others. A little bit about regional water supply plans, what they do and what they don't do. Simply speaking, a water supply plan is a proactive approach towards water supply. We know there will be increased needs for water in the future and potential shortfalls. Water supply plans provide a roadmap to let us get ahead of those demands by identifying sources and strategies now on how those demands will be met, while still protecting our natural resources. Approval of the plan also triggers a requirement for local governments to update their 10-year water facilities work plan within 18 months of plan approval. What a plan does not do is it does not establish MFLs. Those are adopted by rule. However, the prevention and recovery strategies are included in the water supply plans. Public participation is a critical part of the planning process. We need participation from all stakeholders to get input during that process. This provides a balanced approach to reflect the needs of the planning area. We solicit input and participation at group stakeholder meetings and during governing board meetings. Also, meetings are held with individual stakeholders to give us more details to consider and incorporate in the plan update. In the 2018 plan 5 years ago, these water supply issues were incorporated into the plan. There's limited opportunity for increased surficial aquifer use. Surface water availability is limited. Freshwater discharges are affecting the health of the coastal estuaries. And there's not enough freshwater sources to meet future 20-year demands. So long-term sustainability of brackish groundwater sources is important. The 2018 plan had this conclusion that future water demands of the region can continue to be met through the 2040 planning horizon with appropriate management, conservation, and implementation of projects. Those projects include SERP, Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, and other projects to meet environmental needs, water supply development by 9 utilities, completion of repairs to the Herbert Hoover Dike, and implementation of a revised Lake Okeechobee schedule. Now I'm finished, and now Mark is going to give a presentation on the plan update schedule.
Hey, good morning. This is Mark Elsner. I'm the Water Supply Bureau Chief here at the South Florida Water Management District. And next. Here's our schedule for completion of this 5-year update. We're starting on the left in May, and our schedule is to complete this and present it to the governing board for their consideration in April of 2024. The schedule incorporates 3 stakeholder meetings like the one today, a technical methods workshop, and 2 governing board meetings to present the draft plan and the final plan. As you'll see through the stakeholder meetings, these presentations are going to cover most of the topics that are included in the plan. and the presentations will be posted on the website. Actually, they're already posted. In the past, we've received comments from the public and stakeholders of the potential of getting chapters earlier instead of being hit with one large document at the end. We heard that, and we will be releasing chapters for early release or posting for your review and comment following each of these meetings. So, for example, we'll be presenting the demand estimates and projections as part of this meeting. Within the next month, we will post that draft chapter 2, for your review and comment. And hopefully that'll reduce the effort at the end in reviewing the entire document. We do plan on making the draft plan available for public review in the December-January timeframe. And, as Tom indicated, we do stagger development of our water supply plans. And if you've been part of our process, we've typically completed those plans in November or December every year, such that we have one plan being approved by our governing board each year. I want to now take a few minutes and just talk about why we're extending that schedule out to April of 2024. As Tom indicated, as part of our planning effort, we do review our prevention and recovery strategies associated with MFLs, and if needed, update them as part of the water supply plan process. We have 6 MFLs in the Lower East Coast planning area. We have 3 associated with prevention strategies and 3 with recovery strategies. We've evaluated the strategies and recognize that the Lake Okeechobee MFL recovery strategy needs to be updated. Yeah. So as a refresher, in the 2018 plan, this is from Appendix C. The Lake Okeechobee MFL recovery strategy consists of 4 components. Those are indicated in black: environmental enhancement, regulatory constraints, water shortage restrictions, and capital projects. These also are the 4 components that are in 40E8. The language in the red is what has been included in the 2018 plan. And I really want to focus on the capital projects as part of this presentation I'm giving now. We had 2 projects listed. We had the Lake Okeechobee Watershed Restoration Project and the Herbert Hoover Dike Repair and Revised Lake Regulation Schedule. If you're not familiar with the Lake Okeechobee Watershed Restoration Project, or what we refer to as LORP, this is a project and the only project in development right now north of the lake, and is designed to increase water storage capacity in the watershed in an effort to achieve ecological desirable water levels in Lake Okeechobee, improve the quantity and timing of discharges to the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee estuaries, and restore degraded habitat for fish and wildlife through the study area. That process has been moving on. It has morphed and changed. The Corps developed a revised draft project implementation report and supplemental environmental impact statement and released it for review and comment. The current plan only includes wetland restoration and ASR, but no above ground storage. The status of the project is it's still under evaluation and in the Corps planning process. The second part of this capital projects portion of the MFL recovery strategy is the Herbert Hoover Dike and Lake Regulation Schedule. And after a decade and a half, the Herbert Hoover Dike Rehabilitation and Stabilization Project was completed last year. Yay. And a new revised lake regulation schedule is under development, as part of LOSM. And I'm sure many of you participated or followed that. And right now, the final record of decision is pending on LOSUM and is currently planned to occur sometime this year by the end of 2023. So as part of this effort, some of the considerations that we included in our 2023 scope for the Lake Okeechobee MFL strategy is we want to allow sufficient time to develop this revised recovery strategy. And some of the decisions or considerations that we included in our planning effort was the record of decision of LOSUM is pending. And as I indicated, right now will probably happen at the end of this year. Also, as part of LOSUM and the analysis of the selected plan, it does modestly change water supply performance related to Lake Okeechobee MFL, but the MFL will remain in recovery phase. It didn't move the needle enough. We're not planning any changes to regulations for existing legal users, but there are several additional capital projects that are being planned and constructed, such as EA Reservoir, C43 Reservoir, and storage north of the lake that need to be considered in the revised or updated recovery strategy. Next. And you may have heard earlier this year, but the governor signed Executive Order 2306 to achieve even more now for Florida's environment. As part of that, it does direct the South Florida Water Management District to develop additional storage north of the lake. The district is advancing that directive as part of Component A storage reservoir process. It's under the 203 authority. And this is similar to the process that was used with the EA reservoir. This process is going on, and the schedule is to have the final feasibility study completed by the end of 2023. The project is indicated on the slide is Component A reservoir or LOCAR. You'll hear a lot. And then further, the executive order wants to target WRDA 2024 for authorization of all the lake projects. We also, with these number of projects and wanting to be able to determine if the recovery strategy is sufficient or not, we're in the process of development of a numeric storage assessment tool. And these projects that are under construction or planned, including storage north of the lake, need to be included in that. We will talk about this assessment tool at our technical methods workshop. But as a result, and based on the timeline of these other storage planning efforts, the time to accomplish these tasks extend beyond 2023. So we've extended the schedule for the 5-year update to April of 2024.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Mark, for the presentation about the plan update schedule. At this time, I want to go over some housekeeping items. As we have a lot of participants, we request that all comments be limited to around 3 minutes. You'll notice on this slide directions on how to raise your hand in Zoom. So if you're participating via Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. If you're participating via phone, *9 raises your hand, *6 mutes and unmutes your phone. So when you're called upon, please state your full name and affiliation prior to providing comments or questions. With that, we will begin with questions and comments. Do we have anybody who's has any questions or comments about what we've talked about so far? Raise your hand, please.
Yep. Paul Gray. Hey, Paul.
Hi, guys. Paul Gray from Audubon, Florida. Just kind of curious, it's something I never really noticed before. The boundary of the LEC does not include Lake Okeechobee. but obviously Lake Okeechobee is very, very important for the LEC water supply plan. Is there a reason why it's not in the boundary?
Well, it actually touches 4 of our planning areas. When you look at let me go back to the map where you can see that. It's formally included in the lower East Coast because much of the water supply heads down to the lower East Coast service areas, but it also abuts the upper East Coast, lower Kissimmee Basin, and the lower West Coast. So it's formally included in the lower East Coast plan.
Yeah, it's kind of a semantic question, but just it was funny that the boundary does not go around Lake Okeechobee since this is the plan that relies on it the most. But anyway, just question. Thank you.
Yep, sure. Anyone else?
No.
Okay. If there are no other questions or comments at this point, we'll continue on. Let me get back to where I was. Okay. Next on the agenda, we have Nancy, and she's going to tell us about progress since 2018. Go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, good morning. My name is Nancy Demonstrani. I'm the Lower East Coast Water Supply Plan Manager. And this morning, I'm going to talk about the progress that has been made since the last Lower East Coast Water Supply Plan update in 2018 and go over the current 2023 Lower East Coast Water Supply Plan update goal and objectives. Since the last Lower East Coast plan plan update in 2018, we have not stopped working and have continued to stay involved with the collection and analysis of data that are included in this update. Next slide. First, I'm going to cover water resource development projects that have occurred since the last 2018 Lower East Coast Water Supply Plan update. There are 2 types of projects that are required by Florida law to meet water needs: water resource development projects and water supply development projects. Water resource development projects are projects that support and enhance water supply development, but do not directly produce specific amounts of water. And these are done by entities such as the South Florida Water Management District or the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Water supply development projects are done by users such as public supply utilities when a project or when a utility has additional projected demands that cannot be met by the traditional sources. They need to develop water supply projects to meet those additional demands, which typically involves using an alternative source such as brackish water from the Florida aquifer or reclaimed water. Water resource development projects in the Lower East Coast are strongly influenced by the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, or more commonly known as SERP. Some current water resource development projects in the Lower East Coast planning area are listed on this slide, and they're shown on the map on the right. Due to the large number of project and components included for these water resource development projects, the map may be a little difficult to see. So I'm going to just go over a general location of where these are. Starting with the southern portion of the planning area, we have Biscayne Bay Coastal Wetlands, the Biscayne Bay and Southeastern Everglades Ecosystem Restoration, the C-111 South Dade project, and then moving further north to the central portion of the planning area, you have the Central Everglades Planning Project Everglades Agricultural Area, or CEP-EAA. And then we have, moving further north, we have projects centered around the lake, such as the Lake's Okeechobee System Operating Manual, or LOSOM, the Herbert Hoover Dike Repair, and Lake Okeechobee Watershed Restoration Project. And finally, in the western portion of the planning region, there is the Western Everglades Restoration Project. Next slide. An updated support document was developed in 2021 that details information for all planning areas located within the district. And this contains information that typically does not change over time, and it acts as a supplement to all water supply plans. Some information that is included in this document are things such as water use permitting process, comprehensive conservation support. There's a description of the physiography of the regions, water resource protections, ecosystem restoration and resource development projects, and water source option and treatment processes and costs. Currently, the treatment cost section is being updated, so be on the lookout for that information in this coming year. And this document can be found on the Lower East Coast Water Supply Plan webpage with the plan documents at the link that's shown at the bottom of this page. It can also be accessed from all of the Water Supply Plan web pages. Next slide. The Water Use Estimation Report is a report that's produced annually by the district water supply staff and has been developed since 2014 or the past 8 years. This report includes actual and estimated use and provides a summary of reported withdrawals for each of the 6 water use types by county. It also provides a breakdown of the sources that were used to meet those demands, such as fresh groundwater, brackish groundwater, surface water, and reclaimed water. The most current copy, which details the 2021 use, is located on the server at the following link that you can see on the bottom of the slide. You also can find copies of all the past water use estimation reports on our main water supply planning webpage. Next slide. Since the last plan update in 2018, there are several hydrogeological studies that have been completed as shown by the list on the right. These studies provide us with valuable information such as the conditions or characteristics of the aquifers, such as water quality, or the position of the saltwater interface. I'm not going to go through all of these, but scrolling down the list from the top, first one's a detailed report on the saltwater interface. And you can see that graphic is on the left-hand side is the cover for that technical publication. The next 2 down are examples of water quality reports. And then the next one down from that is a report on aquifer characteristics from a site in Palm Beach County. And all of these reports can be found on the district scientific publications and SEPHR technical publication website. Next slide. Groundwater monitoring efforts continue to keep us up to date on groundwater conditions throughout the district. The district maintains an extensive groundwater monitoring network for the superficial aquifer system and Florida aquifer system, and partners with the United States Geological Survey to provide support and funding for ongoing monitoring. And just to give you an idea on the numbers, since 2020, the district has 443 monitor sites for the superficial aquifer system, the Florida aquifer system, and the intermediate aquifer system. Of those 443 sites, 113 of those are Florida aquifer monitoring sites. All the monitor data we collect is stored in the district's environmental DB hydro database, and our weekly water conditions report is sent out every week to keep everyone informed on the current groundwater water level changes that happen in response to changes in rainfall and canal levels. And the map on the right shows a graphic from that report. Next slide. Okay, there are 2 regional groundwater modeling efforts, which include the Lower East Coast Planning Area, and those are the East Coast Florida Model, or ECFM, and the East Coast Superficial Model, or ECSM. The East Coast Florida Model is a density-dependent model, which is used to evaluate water quality changes due to the upconing of more saline water. The model boundaries are shown on the map on the right in the yellow outlined box. The northern extent of the model boundary reaches into southern Brevard County and extends south down to the Florida Keys. This model was updated in 2021 for the Upper East Coast Water Supply Plan update. However, the 2045 demands for the Lower East Coast Florida aquifer system were similar in magnitude to the 2040 demands in the 2018 update. So no further updates to the East Coast Florida model were required for this update. The East Coast Superficial Model, which is shown in the black box, extends from southern Indian River County into the Florida Keys. This model is currently under development and will have the ability to evaluate changes in water levels and water quality in the superficial aquifer system for 2021 and 2045 withdrawals. It is a density-dependent model and will be used to estimate the movement of the saltwater interface. Next slide. The district reviews water quality data from Palm Beach and Broward counties and obtains information collected by the United States Geological Survey for Miami-Dade County and prepares maps comparing the current map with past maps of the extent of the saltwater interface in the superficial aquifer system. To date, there have been 3 maps prepared, which are shown on this screen, 2009, 2014, 2019. And if you look at one of these maps, you'll see that they have overlapping lines, and these means that conditions are stable with little or no movement of the saltwater interface. So if you see any movement, those lines will deviate either inward or they'll retreat back towards the coast. The intent is to update these maps once every 5 years. So the next one will be done in 2024. These maps and a technical report describing the production of these maps are available on the district's website at the links shown on the top of the slide. Next slide. In the lower East Coast, there are several water source options and alternatives that are used to meet demands. The traditional sources, which are the most widely used in the lower East Coast, are surface water from canals or on-site lakes and fresh groundwater from the superficial aquifer, which includes the water table aquifer, the Biscayne aquifer, and also the lower Tamiami aquifer in the western portion of the planning region in Hendry and Collier counties. There are also many alternative sources in the LEC available to meet demands, such as reclaimed or reused water, brackish or saline groundwater from the Florida aquifer system, seawater, reservoirs, or aquifer storage and recovery. Although conservation is not technically considered an alternative source, it does reduce the amount of water needed from traditional sources, so it is shown on this slide since it reduces the reliance on traditional sources. Next slide. To assist local users in developing water supply projects, the district periodically provides funding assistance to public supply utilities, local governments, and other water users for alternative water supply and water conservation projects. For the time period of 2018 through 2022, there have been 8 alternative water supply projects, which have created 18.63 million gallons per day in capacity, and the district provided approximately $7.8 million in funding. For the same time period, there were 20 conservation projects funded, which those are not listed on this slide because it would have been way too busy, but there were 20 of them, and those were funded by the district for $1.04 million, and that created 1.13 million gallons per day of savings. Next slide. The 2 sources of groundwater used to meet demands in the lower East Coast planning area are fresh groundwater from the superficial aquifer system, which, as I stated before, it includes the water table aquifer, the Biscayne aquifer, and also the lower Tamiami aquifer in the western portion of the planning area. And then also there is the Florida aquifer system, which has chloride concentrations of greater than 250 milligrams per liter, and contains the upper Floridan, the Avon Park permeable zone, and the lower Floridan aquifer. And if you look at the cross section on the left-hand side at the very bottom, you have the Boulder zone, which has chloride concentrations of greater than 19,000 milligrams per liter, which is equivalent to seawater. And this is primarily used for deep well injection purposes in the lower East Coast planning area. Next slide. Okay, public supply groundwater demands in the lower East Coast planning area from the superficial aquifer system are shown in the blue, and the demands from the Florida aquifer system are shown in the gray. And as you can see, from 2008 to 2021, demands from both sources have remained relatively stable with a steady increase in population. The population is shown by that yellow orangish line, and that is only permanent residents, not seasonal residents. The big drop in demands you see from 2007 to 2008 is the result of the implementation of new year-round irrigation ordinances, the economic downturn, and increased and improved water conservation measures. Next slide. And as traditional sources have become limited, the use of reclaimed water in the lower East Coast has increased. In the lower East Coast planning area, reclaimed use has increased in 1994 from about 10 million gallons per day to about 100 million gallons per day in 2021. The fluctuations that you see on the graph of the up and down reflect either the addition of new users, so you'll see the reclaimed use go up, and then when it goes down, that's usually a result of abundant rainfall, so they wouldn't have to use as much water, so the reclaimed use goes down. Total wastewater reused in 2021 through 2022 for the lower East Coast planning area was approximately 100 million gallons per day. However, for that same time period, 590 million gallons per day of wastewater was disposed of through deep well injection or ocean outfall. So there is definitely a potential for growth and reuse in the lower East Coast planning area. And with that, well, that's it. Questions?
Okay, thank you, Nancy. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. It was crystal clear. Nobody has any questions on that one. Good job, Nancy. Give it another minute. No? Nobody? Okay. Well, then let's move on with the agenda. Kevin Carter is going to now give an overview of Broward County utilities. Kevin, take it away.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me, Tom?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, it's great to be here today, and I couldn't believe when Mark gave me a call like a few weeks ago and asked me to present. I couldn't believe it's been 5.5 years since we gathered together at Broward College for our last Lower East Coast Water Supply Plan update kickoff, and just take a moment and reflect, what has happened with us, our communities over the last 5 years. Certainly some major challenges, and let's hope the next 5 years are going to be much more stable, and I look forward to this planning process. The other thing I would ask, I have the privilege of being able to talk about 400 of my favorite people and the community that I love, and being able to provide the world's #1 resource, water, to our community. But as I go through what we've been up to the last 5 years, I asked for the other utilities to think of some highlights that you have. And so when I close, we'd like to have a short conversation about, I know there's been some great work with the colleagues and friends throughout the lower East Coast. So why don't we go ahead to the next slide? I like to look back in time when we think about planning forward, and when I talk about our utility. And we started in 1962. We just celebrated our 60th birthday last year. Construction of our North Regional wastewater plant actually began in 1972, and you can see the box there of what the lay of the land looked like back then. Certainly much different. In fact, Broward County's population in the 1960s was about the same population that we currently service with drinking water, around 300,000. One of the key funding mechanisms across the country in the 1970s was the US EPA's Clean Water Act grants. And I mention that now because at the end of my presentation, I'm going to talk about our current funding situation, which is basically generational type funding available to utilities to develop projects and move your utility forward. By 1976, we established our 3 retail areas, and we're moving towards the future. Next slide, please. So the neighborhood has changed, and you can see now also our utility has changed. Over 400 employees, as I mentioned previously. We serve over 600,000 residents with wastewater treatment, and then over 300,000 residents receive our drinking water, and that includes both retail and our wholesale service. One of the things I'm proud about with our utility is we're award-winning. We were Collection System of the Year in 2022. Michael Kelly, our utility superintendent, is a rock star, and he was awarded the Dr. AP Black Award last year. And then we also have the Florida section of the American Water Works Outstanding Water Distribution. And then I was also very privileged to receive the Alan B. Roberts Jr. Award last year from the section. And I mentioned that today because one of the reasons I received that award was my time serving as the Water Utility Council Chair. And when I look at the participants at this meeting, you are all part of that award. And when I go out across the state, it's always great to be able to represent our region because our state is so diverse. And so I just want you to know how thankful I am to work with you all. Also, if I've been researching the history of Alan B. Roberts Jr. He was actually with the city of Fort Lauderdale for over 30 years, including their director and the first executive director of the Florida section of the American Waterworks Association. So our region is represented at the state level with Mr. Roberts' award. Next slide, please. One of the unique things about the Broward County Water and Wastewater Service is our surface water management, our water management division is actually within our organization. So our water supply planners, our source water planners are right here, right down the hall. In fact, Susan Bodman, our director, is on this meeting today, as well as Mike Zerkniski. They are critical as we work with water supply planning. They also, of course, work with drainage and flood control, just like the South Florida Water Management District. But over the years, we've had an integrated water resource management plan where we've optimized our systems to help with saltwater intrusion abatement and recharge for potable water supply. And you can see on the map on the left-hand side, the areas that we work in here in Northern Broward County, and also some of the really cool boats that I need to get out on someday. So got to get back out into the field. So next slide, please. I mentioned the development of the regional wastewater system back in the 70s with some of the Clean Water Act money. Our facility had about 95 million gallons per day as far as permitting, permitted capacity, but typically around 70 million gallons a day. Pretty much the northern third of the county. And our large users, I won't list them all, but many of them are on this meeting. And current effluent management is through the ocean outfall and then 8 on-site deep injection wells. 5.5 years ago, I mentioned that our water reuse capacity was at 10 million gallons a day. And currently, we are now up to 26. And it's got some slides coming up to describe that improvement. Next slide, please. One of the things in the utility world, for those of you who are not aware, we're looking inward to understand our carbon footprint and ways that we can reduce emissions and be more resilient with our energy. And we have an innovative cogeneration system that reduces almost 9,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually. And so what happens is we take some of our waste stream, including fats, oils, and greases from local restaurants, and we're able to create energy, and it offsets our power bill by almost 25%. And we are projecting over 17 years, saving $26 million a year. So this is something that, other utilities, if you haven't looked into this type of technology, I would encourage you to. I would be glad to host you with a visit. Miami-Dade County is, we've been coordinating with them. They're looking to do a similar type project. And speaking of awards, this one has actually captured us 2 Utility of the Future Today Recognition Program awards. So one of our prouder pieces of our facility. Next slide, please. All right, I talked about water reuse being increased, part of our resiliency. Sometimes resiliency is mandated on you. And in this case, it was the 2008 Ocean Outfall State Law mandated our increase to beneficial reuse from 10 mgd, million gallons per day, to 26. When we first started looking around, how are we going to do this? Initial cost estimates were almost $500 million. And part of that is, one of the things here in the Lower East Coast, particularly Broward, Miami-Dade County, we grew up before the state really embraced water reuse. The first water reuse laws were in 1989. Some of the rules, some of the major regulations and further laws which enhanced reuse across the state occurred in the 1990s. By then we're almost 1.5 million people. So it was going to be a challenge, just going in the streets, neighborhoods, digging up, and and having to replace, of course. So it was a big cost. But fortunately, we talked to our colleagues up at Palm Beach County, and they needed some water reuse in their south region. Now, so some of you know, Palm Beach County Water Utilities Department has been a leader in water reuse since the 90s, but they did have this pocket that they needed some supply. And so by working with them, we were actually able to reduce our construction costs to a little over $90 million. And you can see there the purple pipeline. Thank you for showing that. That is now in the ground. And also the next phase is Palm Beach County is building their system. Broward County is paying upfront over $50 million for their system. And then over time, as that revenue comes back, we will be repaid. But we're not just working with Palm Beach County. We also have partnerships with North Springs Improvement District, City of Coconut Creek, which we've had water reuse interlocal agreement for a number of years now. And we're very excited to announce that we just signed an interlocal agreement with Deerfield Beach. City of Deerfield Beach is proactively looking to increase their water reuse throughout their city. Next slide, please. Just some pictures to show the construction and then the final product. One of the things that happened with this project is if you look at the top left-hand picture, the new electric distribution building also has helped with our resiliency. It's built up to handle 26-inch rain events, hopefully, as we just experienced amazingly last month. But it also helps with our duplication and having the ability to withstand power loss. And so it's state of the art and actually helps our whole system, not just the water reuse. But we also built new effluent filters and chlorine contact tanks. Next slide, please. When you build a pipeline, as I mentioned, in urban Broward County, you do have to tear up some streets that are pretty popular roadways. We went right up Powerline Road. For those of you know the 954, that is a very busy highway. So that created a lot of night work, as you see on the right-hand side. And certainly a big project, which happened right during the middle of COVID. Fortunately, we were able to get this project in the ground before a lot of the supply chain issues, which is something that I think if we have the opportunity, I think we should talk about when I'm done with my presentation. That is certainly affecting utilities' ability to do projects today. Fortunately, we got this one in right before a lot of that global supply chain issues started to occur. Next slide. And as Nancy showed, $3 million alternative water supply grant helped fund this project. You can see the ribbon cutting ceremony. It was a really great day. Drew was there, Mr. Bergeron, Representative Konchowski. It was a good day to celebrate alternative water supply, water reuse, really growing in Broward County. And we had some good news stories that day. And all in all, just an excellent end to a project. I want to thank Mark for coming down as well. Stacy Adams is on, our project manager. And if you have not looked at applying for alternative water supply grants, I encourage you to definitely do that. And I have some more information on that in a future slide. Next slide, please. All right, let's talk about drinking water. We're going to talk about water supply. That's why we're here. The map on the left shows our different districts. For those of you not aware of Broward County, I believe we have 25 water providers. So we're different than, for example, Miami-Dade County. I believe that overall in the county, there's maybe over 200 million gallons a day. We produce about 15% of that. So it's about 60,000 for wholesale, which you see on the right-hand box there. Our 2017 population was just over 240,000. We're throughout the county. So we have northern part up here in Deerfield Beach, Pompano Beach, and then down into Lighthouse Point. Then in the central part of the county, pieces of Fort Lauderdale, Lauderhill, Lauderdale Lakes, Oakland Park, even a little piece of Plantation. I think we're over 15 cities that we're a part of. And then we get down to District 3. One of the unique things about our service area is we supply the Fort Lauderdale Airport and Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. And so that's one of our big customers, and of course, an important part of our thriving economy. When we look back 5.5 years ago, we were about 27 million gallons a day for our overall water demands. And at the time, the projections were 2040 were for 31. So 4 million gallons a day delta that we needed to find for future use. Next slide, please. So another part of our resiliency that we needed to look forward, and as most of the utilities and other water users know on this meeting, with the regional water availability rule, we needed to find alternative water supply to meet our future needs. And fortunately, the C51 reservoir, which it's hard to believe that conversation started, gosh, I was at the Water Management District then, I believe, 2008, 7, something around that time frame. And like a lot of our big storage projects throughout the watershed, it takes time. And fortunately, we are near construction ending here in 2023. And this project is just a great regional project and is our answer to our future needs. We bought in for 6 MGD, and if you recall from the last slide, we have a delta of 4 MGD, and so at 4.6 million per million gallons per day. We were the first ones to sign on, and our county commission, fortunately, have been big supporters of this project. And when you have that support from the leadership for what your utility is doing, it just makes all the difference in the world. So we thank them very much. Next slide, please. And we thank the South Florida Water Management District and the Lake Worth Drainage District. So Tommy's on. This project would not be possible without their systems bringing out much needed water south. And the participating utilities, I'm not sure if everyone is on, but there's 8 of us, and certainly shows the critical nature of this project, and really looking forward to another ribbon cutting. It will be even better than the one we had for our water reuse project. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about some future projects. And when we talk about our resiliency at Broward County, we've been looking at mitigation projects as far as climate change, sea level rise. And one of them is our regional effluent and reuse solutions. For those of you not aware, the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, who I think just had their name changed by the state legislature, but I have to double check that, is administering a Rebuild Florida Mitigation General Infrastructure Program, which was like over $300 million from the feds through the HUD Community Development Block Grant. And the purpose is to design our communities to be more resilient to future disasters. And you know, when you think about resiliency, it really, and my favorite definition is you bounce back from a hit, and then you build to be stronger so you can take the next hit. And that's really at the bottom line of this grant money. We were awarded a 50% match, 6.25 million in the first cycle for this regional project to help us mitigate risk for hurricanes, droughts, and also saltwater intrusion, an important part of this project. So when we think resiliency, it's not just about when we get too much weather, it's maybe when we don't get enough. And so both effluent and water reuse lines are going to be constructed, and Randy Brown's one of our major partners. I know he's on this meeting. And we're really looking forward to getting this project started. Construction is not anticipated until next year, and probably about 5 years from now, hopefully, God willing, if I get another chance to give you an update in 5 years, there'll be another ribbon cutting photo. Next slide. So let's keep talking about grants. And I don't know about you all, I don't know how many of you apply for grants, but last September, I had the crazy idea of let's put in 6 grant applications to the Resilient Florida Grant Program, not thinking that we would in any way get all 6, but we did. And that just goes to show you the resiliency money that is out there and that you as a utility should be thinking about. We were able to get some for our canal system that I talked about, our water management group. Septic to sewer is a huge issue in our state, as many of you know, particularly in the St. Lucie watershed, Indian River Lagoon, but also in South Florida. Biscayne Bay is one of the big issues in Miami-Dade County, is getting some of the septic into sewer. And in fact, we kind of copied what Miami-Dade had done the year before. And I'll show you that on the next slide. But certainly the dollars are there. Our state legislature and governor are really focused on resiliency as we need. I know, but frankly, it's unfortunate that we need to do this. But the fortunate thing is the dollars are there. And so thank you, DEP. Now I get to work, we get to work with 6 contracts. So that will be fun, but the end goal will be made, and we're very fortunate to receive these dollars. Next slide, please. And yeah, just to show you an example, this is actually from the previous couple years of awards, looking across the state. And resiliency is not just a coastal issue. If you look at the grant dollars, yes, a lot of them are on the coast, but even in places like Gainesville, up in Gulf County, which, you know, we're seeing dollars for utilities through the Resilient Florida Grant Program. Septic sewer, water treatment plant pump station in Markville Island, a big regional reservoir over at Peace River, just some of the examples. And then our award that we started us off last year is one of our canal conveyance improvements, which helps with both flood control and then saltwater intrusion abatement and helping with our potable water supply. Next slide, please. And so if you don't remember anything else about my presentation today, please remember this, this slide. Look at Ben Franklin there. Picture your utility receiving a bunch of Ben Franklins. The state legislature, again this year, generational funding. You know, I think back to when I started the utility in 2015, and we were just hoping to get money for our pipeline year after year, and nothing happened. And then, but over the last couple of years, we've really seen the funding increase. Now, the state legislative budget of 2023 still needs approved by the governor, but currently in there, $300 million for the Resilient Florida Grant Program, $60 million for alternative water supply. So it was $40 million for about 4+ years, $50 million last year. And part of that, Nancy mentioned the conservation grants, and that's something that we've had a great partnership with South Florida Water Management District, including last year, another $25.5 thousand for our toilet rebate program, something that our community really, it really likes to get part of, and being part of water conservation, receiving those dollars to help make those in-house improvements. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a purple pipe down Powerline Road that you apply for, but it could be a conservation grant. And then over $1 billion, and that's total across the state for water quality improvements. So certainly, please, when this budget gets passed, if you've got projects that are raring to go, you may have an opportunity to have a funding partner to see them implemented. The state revolving fund, the team up at DEP, they had a meeting yesterday, in fact, as administering the federal bipartisan infrastructure bill, which was, again, generational funding spread across the United States. Importantly, the dollars that are being administered for emerging contaminants such as PFAS. And if we had another 2 hours, we could talk about PFAS, but I'm going to use this meeting as a chance to escape the topic. But if you do have questions on it, please give me a call. As many of you know, recently EPA had published proposed PFAS drinking water regulations that we're all just trying to figure out how we're going to meet those, but we will, because that's what we do, provide safe, reliable drinking water. The other part of the funding that DEP is really promoting right now is lead service line replacement dollars. Now, we believe in a state we don't really have much lead because of we really grew up as a state and populated after lead was really a tool in the toolbox. However, we are mandated to do inventories, and DEP has, how was it Shannon put it yesterday? Let's just say she said they have a bunch of money and to help with inventory projects. And importantly, they have made a point to make an exception for certain SRF rules that will allow them to get this money out to the utilities. And so now is the time to talk to Shannon about this. For those of you who know her, Shannon Speech Frost in the SRF office. And we're hopeful that we're going to have a representative from DEP in 2 weeks. I'm going to give a shout out for the Florida Water Resources Conference, the FSA WWA Water Utility Council, the FWEA Utility Council, and the FWEA Water Resources Reuse and Resilience Committee are having a 3-hour workshop on Thursday afternoon. So 2 weeks from today. So please put that on your calendar, followed by a happy hour meeting. So it'll be a great day of dialogue. We'll be talking about these funding pots, and yes, we will be talking about PFAS. Another funding stream that you should be paying attention to, and particularly, I mentioned our cogeneration plant. We talk about trying to reduce our carbon footprint. The Inflation Reduction Act includes major new funding for advancing clean energy, climate resilience, and environmental justice. We're really just trying to understand this new stream of money. This is the time of webinars. In fact, the National Association of Clean Water Agencies is having a webinar next week on this. So it's really information gathering, but another generational pot of money potentially for your utility to use. And then when we talk about mitigating for future storms, like our 26-inch rain event last month, FEMA has the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Grant Program. It is a lot of work to put one of those grant packages together, but it's a lot of money. And in many cases, it's a 75, I believe, % federal share. So certainly a good pot of money that you could access, and then has been received a lot of funding recently from Congress. Next slide. I got to close with FLOWARN. For those of you who don't know what FLOWARN is the Florida Water and Wastewater Agency Response Network that I've had the great privilege of being on the steering committee for 6 or 7 years now, and in the Southeast region coordinator. And last September, all of our lives changed, especially for our friends, family, and colleagues on the Southwest coast. And the utilities, as should be no surprise, came to respond and to get water systems back on at places as bad hit as Sanibel Island, Fort Myers Beach. You can see in that box, the Southeast coast was amazing. I can't tell you how proud I am of my friends and colleagues across our region. You can see the number of utilities that responded. I can tell you as the coordinator, you could double that number, the people that were ready to go after. But the response was swift. We were able to get drinking water systems back up and running in most places within a week, as well as getting wastewater systems back and going. And it wasn't just the Southeast coast. You can see the other utilities as far up as the Panhandle, JEA sent over 100 people to Sanibel Island. Miami-Dade County was our leader in our region and tackled one of the toughest places, Fort Myers Beach. But each of those utilities listed should be commended and celebrated. And I even had time to make a slide yet, but just last month when Fort Lauderdale received 26 inches of rain, and if you're not aware, I think 23 of that happened in 7 hours. I got to drive through some of that. It was one of the most interesting times of my time on this earth. But 13 utilities responded, including Bonita Springs, driving across Alligator Alley to help the city of Fort Lauderdale dewater their worst hit neighborhoods. And again, showing that utilities helping utilities and friends helping friends, and just speaks to what this community is, the water sector. When somebody is hit, that people are jumping to help, and they know that if they do so, should we be the ones that are hit with the storm, that we will be helped and assisted to get our communities back up and being resilient to the storms that are a commonplace in our state. Next slide, please. So that's it for my presentation. Conversations lead to solutions. Let's talk. There's some of our water heroes that went over to Southwest Coast. I really like the picture on the left with the water spewing up in the sky, and then success. In the middle, you see the great welcome our teams received. On the right, you see Pompano Beach. They reported people coming out of their houses and cheering. And water is life. And during times of emergencies and storms, we provide it. And so with that, I will close. And as I mentioned at the start, really would like to have a conversation with some of the other utilities, hear what you've been doing for the last 5 years.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Very good presentation and well spoken. It's true. Water brings us all together. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Kevin? Please raise your hand.
Come on, friends. I know you guys have been doing some great stuff.
They're shy. You're not shy, Kevin, but apparently they are.
Francois.
Well,
Oh,
at least-
Francois.
Hey, hello guys. Good morning, Francois Dumont. I'm with the city of Miramar, the utilities director. How are you doing, Kevin?
Great, Francois. Great to hear you.
Very good. That's a great presentation as always, Kevin, and thanks for your leadership in this utilities field. Always challenging. Kevin, as you realized and you mentioned that you did seek for and find funding sources for some of your projects. Can you elaborate a little bit as to what level of preparation were this shovel-ready projects? What kind of planning documentation were you required to get those additional funding for your projects?
Very good question, Francois. So many times, as some of you know, when you go for state appropriations, they want shovel ready. Fortunately, for the resiliency funding, at least last year, they also were looking for projects that were still in the design phase. Part of that is some of the funding. I don't know how it'll be this coming year, but the last couple of years, some of the funding came from some of the COVID relief dollars, federal money, which needs to be spent by 2026. And so they were able to look out and accept projects that, you know, the shovel's not going in the ground for a year or two. So certainly I would encourage you with the dollar amount to put in projects that still are in the design phase. Now for the wastewater grant, it's probably a different, that's one of the water quality improvements. Those, I believe, tend to be focused on shovel ready, but for resiliency, at least our experience, we were able to get projects still in the design phase.
All right, thank you. I have your cell phone, so I will call you back for additional information, and I'm gonna need to pick your brains a little more. But thank you very much for the answer.
Yeah, Francois, you can always, please.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And then I'd also build on the funding, and Stacy's online, but I believe for the AWS funding, when we got ours, we were shovel ready. And I think that tends to be the hope, I guess, for those dollars. But
Yep, this is Mark. That is one of the strong considerations in AWS funding and moving projects forward. They want to get those dollars to work as soon as they can. And Kevin, I was hoping we would get through a meeting without mentioning PFAS. Didn't happen.
it's a game changer. I mean, that's if you know nothing else about it, it's going to change the way we operate. I mean, we're certainly protecting the health of our communities is our number one priority, but it's certainly going to change the way we treat water and how much it costs, et cetera. And so in the timelines to meet the regulations. So if you're not aware of it, you certainly should educate yourself, and please give me a call.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. No other hands are raised, so we're going to move on to Colleen Jordan. She's going to talk about our draft demand estimates and projections for the 2023 plan update.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. My name is Colleen Jordan, and I am the demographer of the district. And today I have the pleasure of going over the demands estimates and projections for the 2023 LEC plan. Next slide. First, let's go over some observations that we were able to identify. We do see a slight decrease in irrigated agriculture acreages. Sugarcane and fresh market vegetables remains the dominant crops in the LEC planning region. There is minimal changes to utility service areas, as well as a slight decrease in population projection, which is possibly due to the 2020 decennial census undercount and various discrepancies with this decennial census. For example, the door-to-door operations was put on hold due to COVID. Plus, this was the first time in census history that the census status question was located on the questionnaire. Also, we were able to identify an increase in golf course development throughout the planning region, more specifically in the Palm Beach region. Next slide. We're going to take a look of a cool aerial that I think was pretty nice to include in here of a then and now of Miami-Dade. So to the left, we have a map that shows Miami-Dade, what it looks like in 1940, versus to the right in 2021, I mean, just massive development. I thought it was a cool clip to include in the slide. Next slide. Now, this is a list of the 6 water use categories that is used at a statewide planning level and in all our water supply plans. I will be going over each one of these categories and their demands. We have public supply, which is the largest category in the lower East Coast. We have the domestic self-supply. Then we have agriculture, commercial, industrial, and institutional, landscape and recreational, and last and not least, we have power generation. Next slide. Now we're going to take a look at the principles for the urban demand development. We are to abide by Florida statute, which entails that the district should maintain BEVA medium county totals. And for those who don't know what BEVA stands for the University of Florida's Bureau of Economic and Business Research, and that is by the University of Florida. Next, we are to describe and relate any growth across the LEC planning region. Also, to identify and utilize the best available data. And most importantly, to be transparent with our methodology and to be in tune with local government planning efforts. Next, we're going to dive straight into our methodology for population projection. The first step is to estimate our base year, and we do so by using Bieber medium county totals and the data from the US Census. And for this plan, this LEC plan update, our base year is going to be 2021. Secondly, we work closely with most of the 54 water utilities in the LEC planning region to determine the current and future service areas. Thirdly, we use TAZs and census tracts along with Bieber medium county growth rate to project the population. Last but not least, we review that population projection with stakeholders and also to take in consideration any input from local government. Next slide. Thank you. Now that we spoke about the methodology, let's take a snapshot of what the population looks like for the updated LEC plan. So to the left, we have the 2021, which we have roughly a 6.2 million permanent residents. And to the right, the bar gives us the 2045 projected population, and which we're expecting to grow to 7.3 million roughly permanent residents. So overall, for the LEC plan update, we're expecting to see a 17% population increase. Okay, so we also, next slide, please. We spoke about earlier about part of the methodology is the service areas and working closely with utilities. So now we're going to take a look at service area boundaries. So to the left, we're going to look at Broward County. To the left, we're going to have the 2021 for Broward County. I know it's a lot, so you can take a look. And then to the right, we have the 2045 service area boundaries. So this is area served by Broward County. So one of the things that I would like to bring to your attention is the importance of working closely with the utilities for future service areas. So if you look at the bottom of the map, so we have a light blue graded area with 16 on 2021. You can see that comparing the 2021 to the 2045, you can see that grayed out area is now shaded blue by 2045. And that area represents Miramar. So I just wanted to give an example of a change and how we track change while working with the utilities for future service area boundaries. On the next slide, we're going to look at Miami-Dade. And for Miami-Dade, we're going to focus so much so when comparing the 2021 to the 2045 service area, we're going to look so on the pink shaded area, which have a 6 on it, which represents the Miami-Dade Water and Sewer Division. And you can see that expansion taking place when we compare the 2021 current service area to the 2045 future service area. So once again, we see expansion taking places, and this was just an example for Miami-Dade. And then we're going to move on to the next slide, which shows us Palm Beach County area. And to the right, we have the future service area. For this example that I would like to give so you can actually identify some changes, I'm going to give 12A. So that is to the western, yes, thank you. This is to the western area. You can see that graded area for current. When you compare to 2045, we see most of it being now yellow. And that area is Palm Beach County Water Utility Division. All right, so next slide, please. So as I did mention, we were going to go over public supply and domestic self-supply. Now, public supply includes water withdrawn, treated, and delivered to service areas by privately and publicly owned water supply utilities. So in layman terms, any household that is being supplied water by utility is considered public supply, whereas domestic supply, DSS, those include individual residential areas in rural areas that might have their own private well or not being served by a utility. And to the right, we have a table that gives the counties in the lower East Coast planning region population, but also broken down by public supply and domestic self-supply. So when you look to the right, we have Broward broken down by PS and DSS. And we can see that overall the population is expecting a 15% increase for Broward County. For Hendry County, we see the breakdown of the two PS and DSS. Hendry County is expecting a 4% population increase from the 2021 base year to the 2045 projected period. Then for Miami-Dade, we're expecting to see the most increase of 19% in population increase for the LEC planning area. And then for the Monroe County, we see a 2% increase. Whereas for Palm Beach County, we're expecting to see an 18% increase. And then for the overall LEC total, as I mentioned in like 2 slides previously, overall the population are expecting to see a 17% increase. I know it's a lot to intake, so you can steer a little bit. All right, we're going to move on to the next slide. The next slide is a chart that shows historical LEC population projection. So all the previous LEC water supply plans and what the population projections were. So currently we are looking at the yellow bar, which is the 2023 plan update. And what we're seeing here is that our current plan is more in tune with our 2013, which is the green line. We're more in tune with the plan then. And one of the reasons that we are speculating is because, once again, that census, that 2020 decennial census, it came in a bit on the low and undercounted. So we're thinking that could be one of the issues that is affecting where the population started as far as our base year 2021. But furthermore, we are still somewhat in tune with our previous projections and where we are seeing ourselves now. We do see a curve, so we do see our yellow line curving our population. And one thing that I also wanted to bring to your attention is that it is important to use or project our population because it also is used for our demands. So in order to get to our demands when planning, we need to use our population projection. And this is done so by calculating a per capita rate from the recent 5 years average population and water use. And then that population projection is multiplied by the per capita rate that derive us to our demands. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide gives us a snapshot of the PS and DSS, public supply and domestic self-supply. So to the left, the first 2 bars give us the bookends. So we have 2021 and then we have 2045. So overall, you were expecting to see an increase of 18% in our public supply demands. So to the right now, there is a bar that gives us the previous plan. So this is the 2018 LEC plan, 2040 number. So the previous plan went up to 2040. So we're showing somewhat of a comparison. So you can see a 5 years extra. We're actually projecting at a lower rate as far as increase for public supply when comparing the previous plan. Next slide. Okay, so we went over public supply and domestic self-supply. So now we're going to move forward with agriculture. Next slide. So this is a list of standard crops used in our water supply plan. As a matter of fact, it is used statewide in all agricultural demands. Next slide. This slide shows a snapshot of agriculture data sources that we use to help guide our planning efforts for agriculture. All right, next slide. Next, we're going to take a look at how the report was developed and how it is used. So in 2013, the state of Florida called upon FDACS to develop a report called FSED. Now, FSED plays a huge role in the district and the way how we develop our demands. So once again, the state of Florida called upon FDACS to develop a report that will give an annual statewide agriculture demands, estimates, and irrigated acreages. That report is called FSED. And if you look to the left, you can see an image of what the report looks like. And FSED stands for the Florida Statewide Agriculture Irrigation Demand Report. And this report gives acreages by historical, current, and 20-year projections by crops, those same standard crops. Also, this report gives demands by crops for average and 1 in 10 rainfall conditions. It also takes into consideration the metadata factored into estimates of historical and current demands. Next slide. By Florida statute, the district is to consider the FSED report demands. Currently, for this LEC plan update, we're using FSED 9. Now, we can deviate from using the FSED demands. However, to do so, we must showcase in our LEC plan, we must showcase the FSED demands and whatever that deviated methodology is. Now, to the right, we have an image of the FSED website. So the FSED report, they also have a site that gives the data from the report in a summary dashboard, which I think is pretty cool. And if you guys have time, feel free to check the website out. We have the link to the bottom. So it basically gives the crops, the demands by plant and region. They also have aquaculture data in there as well. And there's livestock. It's just a pretty cool dashboard and it's very interactive. So you can actually just grab the data straight from there. If you don't feel like reading the report, which is a little lengthy, but very informative. So once again, I like to actually recommend this website for anyone who's just looking for quick data or just looking for a quick snapshot of what the Florida state agriculture looks like at this point in time. And it gives the projections as well. Okay, so next slide, please. So there are two components to the agricultural demands projections. And as I mentioned before, there is the irrigated acreages, and we get that straight from FSED report. And when it comes to the water demand model, there is two options. So there's the FSED demands that we can use, or we can use what we call AFSERS. Now, AFSERS stands for the Agricultural Field Scale Irrigation Requirement Stimulation Model. Now, all previous water supply plans, we have always used AFSERS. So just to be clear, we do deviate from using FSED demands, and we use what we call AFSERS, okay? But our acreages are straight from the FSED report. Next slide. So this map is actually going to show us the acreages straight from the FSED 9 report. So FSED 9 report base year is 2020. So by looking at the map, this is the irrigated acreages by crop. You can see that most of the crops is located in the Western Palm Beach area, the Eastern Hendry County area, and also some in the Southern Miami-Dade County. And by just looking at the map, you can see that the light green shaded area, which stands for sugarcane, we have the list of crops. There you go. We have the list of crops. And the light green shaded area is sugarcane, which lets us know that the LEC planning region dominant crop is sugarcane. After sugarcane, we do have a fresh market vegetable being the second dominant crop, and that is the mustard green, mustard yellow color. Next slide. Now let's take a look at the 5-year incremental acreages by crop. So let's focus on the chart at first. So for the bar chart to the left, we have the 2020 base year. So the LEC plan base year, just want to make this clear, the LEC plan base year is 2021. However, for agriculture, we use the FSED report acreages, and their base year is 2020. So to the left, we have the 2020 numbers of acreages by crop. And once again, we're seeing where sugarcane stands out. Sugarcane is the dominant crop. followed by the fresh market vegetable. So also, I want to bring you to your attention, the green bar, I'm sorry, we'll bring to your attention the blue bar, the blue bar is other, and others consist of non-citrus fruits, sod, potato, and field crops. And then when we compare the future agriculture acreages, once again, sugarcane continues to be the dominant crop. However, we do see a slight decrease. Look at the numbers. We see a slight decrease in the sugarcane. And then once again, fresh market vegetable is the second dominant crop. Again, we're seeing that pattern of a slight decrease by 2045. And to the bottom, I'm going to move your attention to the table to the bottom. We have the first row being the FZ9 LEC plan update. So these are the numbers that we're using currently. We have the 2020 through 2045, so 5-year incrementals, agriculture acreages. So for the 2020 through 2045, we are seeing that decrease, and that's roughly 3% decrease in agriculture acreages. And to the bottom, the second row gives us the previous LEC plan. This is the 2018 LEC plan. So we just put this as, so you can have a comparison as to where we were projecting then versus now. We like to do that. So for this row, you can see that we were projecting for 2020 at a higher rate, a little bit higher back then. And then that plan only went up to 2045. And I personally like to look at the 2040. I'm sorry, that plan went to 2040. I like to look at a 2040 number and also look at our 2045, where we are now 5 years more. And we still see that pattern of growth, so we are projecting at a lower base year for 2020, where we've started off lower. But, if we compare the previous plan, we are still projecting to see an increase. But overall, for the update using the FZ9, yes, there is a 3% decrease. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, when it comes to the agriculture demands, we have the option to deviate from using the FZ demands, and we do so. We do so by using AFSAs. So this slide gives us the comparison as to what is the difference of each model. So one thing that I like to bring is that the district uses AFSA's demands projection to remain consistent with its regional planning modeling efforts. So as I mentioned before, we use this model in all our previous plans, so we use it to stay consistent. And also AFSA's model produces similar results in the water use permit allocation in the region. Whereas, for one example, for FZ, that we are not using, there's a limited set of environmental variables that are used directly in the model. So this is just basically showing the difference with the two models. And just to be clear, we are using AFSAs in this plan update. Next slide, please. Okay, so you can actually see the 2 points that I just mentioned as to why we use AFSAs. And also, just looking at this bar, I want you guys to break it into two. So then we're going to look at the left side at first. So on the left side, we have the AFSAs 2020. As I mentioned, AFSA's base year is 2020. They do 5-year incrementals. However, for this LEC plan, our base year is 2021. So we do consider the 2020 and the 2021 to be somewhat equivalent. So we did a comparison. So if the 2020 FZ 9, and you compare the AFSA's 2021, there's really not much change. It's very minimal. So for AFSA's, for FZ 9, 648.05 MGD in hands, whereas for AFSA's 2021, we're at 641.37 MGD. Again, minimal differences. However, we're going to stick with AFSAs because we have done so in the past to be consistent. Now to the right, we have the projections. So we have the 2045 numbers. We have AFSA's 2045, which is giving us a total agriculture demands of 623.17, whereas for AFSA's, we have the 2045 that gives 620. Again, the difference is less than 3 MGD, really isn't anything to talk about, but again, we are continuing to use our AFSAS, our AFSAS demands to be consistent. Next slide, please. Okay, so to the left, again, we're going to break this chart up so you don't get too overwhelmed. To the left, we're going to compare the two first bar chart. We have the 2021, so the two bookends. This is the 2013 plan update. So this is what we are currently updating our LEC plan with. So we have the bookends of 2021 and 2045. Overall, we're seeing that 3% decrease that I've shown earlier. And then when we look to the right, we have the previous 2018 LEC plan. So this is what we previously projected. Back then, we projected a 6% decrease. Okay, and to the bottom, we have those 5-year incremental data. So we have the table that shows our current AFSAS demands. Again, we have that 2020/2021 throughout 2045 in 5-year increments. And then to the bottom, we have the previous plan. All right. So, once again, I personally like to compare, the apples to apples. So for 2023, the plan update, we see that 3% decrease. But when we compare the previous plan, 2020, so we did start off currently at a lower rate than previous. However, once again, if we compare the 2040 to the the 2045, we do see an increase from the 2040 to the 2045 currently. Next slide, please. So what the numbers that we just looked at was all crops, right? We see the demands by crops. As I mentioned earlier, the FSAD report also gives livestock and aquaculture demands as well. So not just crops. Now, we didn't go in details with the livestock and aquaculture. However, this table is going to break down the total. So this table gives the 2021 and the 2045 numbers. So we just went over crops. So we have the 2021 for the crops. We have livestock now. Livestock is actually expected to stay stable throughout the planning period. So it stays at that 0.64 through 2045. Whereas aquaculture, we're seeing an increase from the 2021 3.19. And by 2045, we're expecting to see that increase to 15.88. And the reason is there's actually a new aquaculture facility in the Miami-Dade County. So we are expecting to see that increase in aquaculture. So overall for agriculture, including those three categories in agriculture, we're expecting to see a 1% decrease. So again, for overall agriculture in the LEC planning region, we're expecting to see a 1% decrease from 2021 through 2045. I'll take a sip of water. Next, we're going to look at commercial, industrial, and institutional. Next slide, please. So CII, which is commercial, industrial, and institutional, consists of self-supplied water consumed by business operations. So for example, these will be facilities like office complex, hotels, mining pits. And the methodology is actually the baseline estimates are on the permitted allocation. So water returned directly to withdrawal sources are not considered in this demands. So to the right, we have a table that gives a breakout of each county in the Lower East Coast planning region and its CII demands. So we have the bookends again. We have the 2021 and 2045. So for 2021, Broward County, we are expecting an increase when we compare through 2045. So by 2045, Broward County is expected to see an increase. Hendry County, however, is expected to stay stable. Miami County has the largest increase. So we go from 73.92 to 87.09 MGD by 2045. There is nothing in Monroe County, whereas Palm Beach County, we're expecting to see growth as well. So we go from 8.89 in 2021 to 10.52 by 2045. So overall, for the LEC planning region, when it comes to commercial, industrial, and institutional, we're expecting to see a 17% increase. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're moving. Well, we're going to move forward to landscape and recreational. Next slide. So landscape and recreational consists of irrigated water usage of either golf courses, parks, cemeteries, large common areas, etc. Now, landscape projections increase by the county population growth rate. So for each one of those counties, whatever the growth rate was, that's how we grow the demands. Whereas for golf courses, the projections have only minor growth. Okay, because you don't see golf courses growing at the rate of population. That's not how it works. To the right, the table gives the breakdown by county. So you can take a look to see where growth is. We can actually take a look. So for Broward County, we are seeing 45.1 MGD in 2021. We expected to see growth by 2045. Henry County, we don't have any. Miami-Dade is expecting to see increase as well. Monroe stays very relatively stable. However, Palm Beach County is where we see most of the development and most of the growth for golf courses. So Palm Beach County has the largest growth of this category. So we're going from 116.57 MGD in 2021 to 131.32 MGD by 2045. So overall for the LEC landscape and rec demands, we're expecting to see a 13% increase. And I also want to bring to your attention that the reclaimed water meets approximately 26% of the landscape and recreation irrigation demands. Also, water demands are based on reported volumes of groundwater, surface water, and reclaimed water. I think that's also important to know. Next slide, please. So next, we're going to move on to power generation. Next. So keep in mind, these demands do not include facilities that use reclaimed water, harvested rainwater, seawater, surface water that returns to a source, or city water. For example, because I think it's also great to know this, because on this table, we only have 2 counties located. However, there is more facilities. An example of another facility is the Port Everglades Energy Center. It is actually located in Broward County, but you would not see that on this table because that facility has circulated and returned of the intercoastal waterway and seawater to meet its power generation demands, as I mentioned. So on the table, we're going to take a look at Miami-Dade and Palm Beach County. So we do see growth in Miami-Dade power generation. So we went from 12.80 MGD to 18.16 MGD by 2045. And Palm Beach, however, Palm Beach County, we're expected to see a slight decline. So we went from a 17.18 MGD to 16.57 MGD. So overall, we're expecting to see a 16% increase total, and most of that total comes from the Miami-Dade area. And I love the picture to the side and the notes, you see solar, there's no demands. So that's a fun fact to remember when calculating the demands for power generation. And we're close to finishing. The next slide, please. We're going to go over the summary of each one of the categories that we just went over. So on this table, we have the 6 categories, and we have the 2 bookends for the LEC plan update. So we have the 2021 to the left, and the 2045. So once again, we have the categories that shows public supplies expecting to see an increase. We have domestic supplies expecting to see an increase. However, agriculture, as we mentioned, is expecting to see a slight decrease. Commercial, industrial, institutional is expecting to see an increase. Landscape and recreational is expecting to see an increase. And the same thing with power generation, expecting to see an increase. So overall, for the drafted water demands update for the LEC water supply plan, we're expecting to see an 11% increase. Now, to the right, we included the previous plan, the 2018 LEC plan, their 2040 numbers. So this is what we projected then. And when we look at the total at the bottom for the 2040 then, compared to where we at for 2045, 5 years later, we're still expecting to see an increase. So thank you guys so much for listening to all my data. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask away.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thank
Was
you.
very, very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone has any questions for Colleen about the demand estimates and projections, please raise your hand.
Eric Meyer?
Hi, Eric.
Eric Meyer,
I think he's still muted.
I think you might still be muted. Yeah, now I can hear you.
Oh,
Yep.
okay. Thank you, Colleen. I represent Atlantic Sapphire. We're a large aquaculture facility down in Hempstead.
Yes.
And I see your agriculture indicates you're going to have a decline. But right now we have more than a 15 MGD Floridan aquifer allocation, as well as about a 500,000 gallon per day surface or shallow aquifer, Biscayne aquifer allocation. And based on expansion projections over the next 10 years, our demand will probably increase by a factor of 8.
Yeah.
So I think the agriculture demands are you're going to see an increase, hopefully, if we're successful. And we'll probably be needing closer to 120 million gallons per day in
Wow.
10
Wow.
years.
So Eric, let me first say thank you for having now myself and my staff members, they came back, they were able to do a tour of your facility and they came back with all the great news. I'm sorry that I missed that opportunity. So we were made aware of such, we were made aware. So thank you for talking about that point. And one of the great thing with these water supply plans is that they get updated every 5 years. So whenever we do see that increase, it is going to reflect in our plans. So, you know, this is one of the reasons why we change our projection every 5 years, so we can include any change as it comes. So that is a great thing, and we are somewhat expecting to see that growth. We are aware of it. So yeah, we're hoping for good things.
Very good, Colleen. Thank you. I just wanted to call that to your attention.
Sure. Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes, thanks for your comments, Eric. And yeah, we enjoyed the tour of your facility. It's a very amazing thing that you're doing down there. We're looking forward to your future growth. One thing just to add to Colleen's comment is we also look at the permit, and although you have plans that you're developing for expansion, it hasn't been officially documented and approved in the water use permit. So although we heard you when you said over 100 million gallons a day, until it's evaluated and approved in the permit, we didn't want to put it in the plan at this time, like Colleen said. Over the next few years, if you modify that permit and get approved for that growth, then we can certainly incorporate it into the next 5-year update. So thank you for that. That's an important distinction that I think we needed to make. Are there any other hands raised? Any other questions or comments for Colleen? Francois, go ahead.
He's on. Hold on.
Hello,
Okay.
good morning, Ms. Jordan. Thank you for the presentation.
Oh, my pleasure.
Numbers are very important. I think we run our business based on numbers. And so I don't know if this is a question or perhaps a comment. I want to leave it on the record. So primarily when City of Miramar received the 2020 census numbers, we weren't too happy with regards to the numbers. We believe the numbers are low for our projections.
Mhm.
I did read an article recently in which several cities throughout the country did contest the numbers from the census. Of course, the census pushed back saying that none of the numbers are accurate. I don't know, and I've spoken to Mark and the folks in the district as well, and your colleagues, and I did kind of put them on I mean, I did write down as a statement that City of Miramar is still contesting the numbers, and we believe the numbers are high based on just to let you know, we are also working on reopening our water use permit, and all that is related to each other as we request additional allocation and so forth. So I don't know if you, by your experience, have any other use or with regards to the municipalities have voiced that same concern as Miramar.
Thank you so much for your comment. I guess this is one thing I want to give somewhat of comfort that you're not alone. I'm not going to list names, and it's actually something that's happening nationwide. We see a lot of people who are contesting the data, coming up with their own methodology, and what I would say is it has affected a lot of people. And for me, working closely with Bieber, which is the University of Florida, and they normally do projections for the whole state. And it is used widely throughout the state of Florida. I would say we see struggles. We have conversations about it. And I personally have been saying this. I've been saying it's going to take about the next 5 years for these numbers to iron out, for us to actually catch up and update 2020, 2021, because these are the basis years. So every decennial census, which is every 10 years, it changes everything. It changes boundaries where we live. It changes everything. And it has been affecting planning throughout the region greatly, because now our 2021 numbers in some areas are projected pretty low. So yes, you're not alone. I personally like to say it's going to take within the next 5 years for us to see these numbers update or look a little more closer to what we are seeing. And we're almost there. And I guess, sometimes there's other data source, who knows, in the future that might becomes more replicable than the census at this point, because it really was not as useful as previous decennial census. So I don't know if that gives you any comfort to know that you're not by yourself. And this is one of the reasons why, when I showed the chart earlier that shows that our current projections is more in tune with not just the previous plan, but the plan before that, because some of the numbers, not all, but some of the areas we were seeing a little lower projection coming in. And, it's not a quick fix. It is not something that Bieber or the census is going to update. And we all could move forward happy to see bigger numbers. It's just something that has to somewhat iron itself out over the years to come.
Understood. Thank you for your answer. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Colleen? Please raise your hand. Not seeing any raised hands. Okay, next on the agenda, we have Nancy to finish up and talk about our next steps in the planning process.
Okay, now I'm going to cover briefly our next steps in the planning update process. Next slide. The objectives from the previous plan update in 2018 were examined and updated as appropriate for this 2023 plan update. And the updated objectives for this plan are as follows. quantify there is enough water to meet demands through 2045 for 1 in 10 drought conditions, protect natural systems and water resources such as the Everglades, encourage water conservation and improve water use efficiency, as well as encouraging the development of alternative sources such as reclaimed water or brackish water from the Florida aquifer system, provide information and support to local government comprehensive plans, and achieve compatibility and integration with incentives such as SERP, minimum flows and minimal levels, or the water use permitting process. Next slide. Okay, this slide provides a snapshot of the 2023 Lower East Coast Water Supply Plan organization. You can see there's 9 chapters with the various topics that are covered in it. We also have associated appendices, and we have an executive summary which summarizes all of those chapters. As Mark mentioned earlier, we will be in probably the next few weeks releasing some draft chapters and appendices for review. So you'll be able to see those soon, and we will send emails out letting you know when those are available for you to review. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, we have coordinated with utilities, agricultural operations, state agencies, and other stakeholders. We've met with many of the public supply utilities in the Lower East Coast area, received comments and feedback, and we've incorporated their comments and some of their feedback into the plan document. We also have met with the agricultural community. We had a meeting to present demands and how we got those demands. We will continue to meet with other stakeholders and state agencies throughout the planning process. Again, we're going to distribute some individual chapters for early review. We are going to continue to stay up to date with the progress of local and regional projects. As I showed you with the water resource development project slide, there are numerous Lower East Coast planning area projects that are going on. So we will keep up to date with those and incorporate whatever we can as those changes in those projects progress. And then we have our next stakeholder meeting. We're projecting that to be in July of 2023. And some of the potential agenda topics for this meeting are an update on comprehensive Everglades restoration plan projects, water resource protection rules. We'll also have a saltwater interface mapping. I showed you briefly the maps on that one slide. We'll go into more detail on how those are developed and give you some idea of how everything works with those. And then we also will have a climate resiliency initiative discussion. And this gives you our 2023 Lower East Coast Plan update schedule. We held our first stakeholder meeting today. And as I just mentioned, we're going to have our next one, we're projecting in July of 2023. In September of 2023, we're hoping to have our technical methods workshop, which will go over the East Coast official model. It'll summarize the setup, what went into the model, and it'll give you an update on their progress. We plan on posting the draft plan sometime in December through January. That'll be for public comment and review. And then we plan to have our stakeholder meeting as well as a governing board meeting where we'll present the draft plan to them in February of 2024. The public comment period ends in March 2024. So you'll have either December or January through March to review the whole document and comment to us. And then we plan on taking the final plan for governing board approval to request that in April of 2024. Next slide. And if you need any water supply information, a lot of stuff will be put on the Lower East Coast Water Supply Planning webpage. We'll post this presentation there. You'll also have a link to the live recording, as well as all the older plan documents and any of the individual chapters or appendices that we post, they'll be on that webpage. We will be sending out workshop announcements via email. And we also will be sending out an announcement when those individual chapters and appendices are available for you to review and comment on. And our contact information is at the bottom. I'm the plan manager. That's my email. And Tom and Mark, who you heard from earlier, that's their email. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, we'll be happy to hear and hopefully we can get back to you and answer anything you have some questions on. And with that, that's all I have today.
Okay, so anyone have any final questions or comments for Nancy or anyone at this point? If you do, please raise your hand. Not seeing any raised hands. Okay, well, I want to thank everyone, our presenters, our panelists, and everyone who joined us and participated in today's workshop. As a reminder, in the next few days following this workshop, the workshop recording will be made available on YouTube. We'll have a link on our webpage to that. Thank you again for participating. I hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thank you all.